I joined and moved into a temple end of April 1971. So literally 3 months I was chanting Hare Krishna. Kirtananda drove a few of us up to Brooklyn Temple, Henry Street Temple for initiation. Every day, that particular July, I think it went on for a week. He would initiate 10 people every day. First initiation was going on, which meant you had to make your japa beads, you had to make your neck beads. We did all that in the basement. We strung our own little beads from the craft shop. That's where you got everything. And of course, seeing Prabhupada, that was the first time I saw Prabhupada. And the initiation day, everything was right in front of the Vyasasan, and secretary had all the beads, around his neck or in his hands, and he would call up the person. So all I remember was trying to memorize the 4 regulative principles, sitting there saying them over and over because you knew that was the question. And finally my time came. So I go up and I learned, we learned everything. This side was in front of the Vyasasan, you offered your dandabats. I sat up. And Prabhupada looks at me and he said, so? He said, what are the regulative principles? And I rattled them off by memorization. And then he said, and he didn't say 60, he asked me, he said, how many rounds do you chant? Which was a little different. And I was chanting I was chanting 20 rounds a day, which I thought was impressive. And I responded in that way. So I said, oh, I'm chanting 20 rounds a day, Prabhupada. And he went, that was it. Not impressed. Just went, And then he said, your name is Srutakirti. And he said, Srutakirti, it's a name of Krishna. He said, it means one whose activities are world famous. So hundreds of them, and everyone's going, ooh, because it's the name of Krishna. And I'm thinking, ooh. And he looks again, he said, and you're Srutakirti Das. So he let me know right away, don't get inflated, it's not you, you're Srutakirti Das. So then I remember going back to my seat, and a godbrother says to me, he said, what's your name? I said, I don't know. And the formula was, after everything, you went back to Prabhupada's room, and Pradyumna would paste, tape on the door your name, your Karmi name and your new name. So you would write it down so you could start to remember that name. Yeah, Srutakirti Das, which Prabhupada shortened to Sruto later on. I had been with Prabhupada for 3 days. So first day, of course, morning was New Vrindavan, afternoon was Pittsburgh, and then we spent 1 day there, and then almost a week in Dallas. Gurukul is, same building, same temple. And so now I was starting the routine on the morning walk. And you learn, the morning walks were always, again, very exciting. And, the usual devotees were there, and then sometimes you would get some, they just got special mercy, maybe new devotees, brahmacharis that weren't necessarily Sankirtan, or Sankirtan devotees that got the opportunity to go 1 day. So this particular day, there's one young devotee. I'm also young brahmachari, 20 years old, and looked like a young boy. And you could see on the walk, he wanted to ask Prabhupada a question. And as I say, that's always risky business, especially introducing the question, not kind of responding to Prabhupada's inquiries. Yet you were taking a chance to ask Prabhupada a question, because you never knew what the response would be. I remember once somebody started saying how people were saying the Gita was less old within the Christian era. And Prabhupada said, why you think that? No, not me, Prabhupada, but some people they're thinking like that, and they say like that, and when you're preaching, what do? He said, well, why are you thinking like that? So asking a question, you're exposing obviously your own doubts. So this boy didn't ask the question. So finally, it's over, Prabhupada. We're back to the car. I open the door of the back door. Prabhupada gets into the car. He sits down. And the devotee, Prabhupada, how do I become Krishna conscious? Same boy. He got it out. And it was a curious question to ask. And Prabhupada looks at him, and he says one word. And then he looks forward, which means, okay, we're done. So I close the door, I get around, and go sit down. Prabhupada's expertise. So he looks at him, he says, desire. It's all we ever do, is desiring. So he just said he wasn't going to sit there with them for 10 minutes, so he said, we have to purify our desire. It's only desire, because that's all we're ever doing, we're desiring. So very quickly, that was Prabhupada, we say, his wit. That was everything for Prabhupada, just one simple thing. So this is what we need to do. Then from desire comes your activities. So what we're doing, this is what we're desiring. If you desire Krishna, it's obvious, what we need to do. It's just Krishna. This is what Prabhupada, this is why it was difficult to be with Prabhupada, because he had no other desires. I know I had so many, I still have so many desires. Then I had so many desires. But to be with that person that has no material desire, not easy. It wasn't easy for me, I know that. As a servant, I cooked for him. That was one of my functions, was cooking. So every day, rice chapatis dal, and 3 to 6 chapatis every day. So one of the charming things when you were a Prabhupada servant, whenever you would leave his quarters and go down into the temple, everyone's coming up to you. What's Prabhupada say? What did Prabhupada do? It's all they wanted to know. You just wanted, what's Prabhupada doing, And it didn't matter what you said, because it was Prabhupada. You could say, well, he put his finger in. It didn't matter, because everything he did was so beautiful. So the one, Shilavati, who was, she was the head pujari for the whole society in '73. People would go to New Dwarka for training. But she was always also wanting to know what to do. And she said to me, she said, when you serve lunch, what's the process? So I told her, I bring in Prabhupada's lunch. There's one chapati, it's hot, puffed up, and it's on the... I said, then you go back into the room, you roll out another chapati, make it, you bring it in. So I like that. I said, one after another, I bring him his hot chapatis. And I didn't think anything of it. So a couple days later, she says, Shruta, she says, guess what? What? She says, I'm doing that for Rukmini Dwarkadish. She says, we make the puri. She said, but I'm going in now, one puri at a time, so that they can have hot puris. And I'm, okay, that sounds... So of course I go back to the room and I said, Prabhupada, I said, the pujari, I said, here, they're giving the puris to the deities now, like I serve you your chapatis one at a time. And Prabhupada just shakes his head. He says, she can't do that. He said, once you bring Krishna his plates, he said, you don't go back into the room until they're finished. He said, yeah. He said, you have to let them finish. He said, tell her that's not possible. He said, not stop it. Yes, Prabhupada. So then another day, they get the daily sweets that they're giving the deities now. So it was the Rajbhog offering, which they would also bring in, maha for us to eat, because there were 4 or 5 of us sometimes with Prabhupada. So now there's these sweets. Now there's no more, it was not sandesh, rasgula, gulab jamun, burfi. It was dried fruit and nuts. And this one literally had in puffed rice, Quaker puffed rice. It became one of the popular items. And maybe whatever else was in there. And then, make sandesh, you're going to spend 3-4 hours making enough sandesh. But these things, you just blend everything up, smash them together. So I put 2 on Prabhupada's lunch plate. And I put his sandesh there. So I give him his lunch. And then wasn't until he got to the sweets at the end of his meal. And he, sees them, I guess. I'm not in the room. I'm not watching him eat. But then when I come in to get his plate, he said, what are these sweets? Which is exactly what I was expecting. That's why I gave them to him. And I said, they're making these for the deities. He said, who is doing this concoction? he said, we have such wonderful sweets, he said, that I've shown for the deities. He said, all the Bengali sweets. He said, well, Sandesh Rasky starts naming all the things that he's shown us. He says, you Americans, never satisfied, always have to change. Everything has to be changed. So we'd always, and then anytime I saw that, I would say it, and he would have to fix it. You know, it's been such a long time. My conclusion is that sometimes changes weren't bad, but Prabhupada knew our tendency, everything. We never stopped. We never knew when to stop. He would rather have some things just continue on than to open that door. And the door has been wide open for a long time, and that's what he tried to prevent. He always kept that door from opening, everything, whether it was the Gopi Bhava Club or changing times for Mangal Artik or whatever it happened to be, he would, bam, slam it. And if it was philosophical, that slam, you know, like I said, that was his Nrsimha incarnation. I mean, Prabhupada, his lips would quiver. You know, it wasn't, you didn't want to be around. His eyes were just like, they could burn you. I mean, it was really very frightening. And it always had to do with philosophy. That was the thing. It was, he knew, if you do that, then everything's gone. But these other things, you had to avoid it because there's just no end to changing. So Prabhupada, he didn't change. Yeah. So this is in Juhu. Prabhupada was living on the 3rd floor. He had a flat on the 3rd floor. So we stayed in Juhu a lot because they were developing the project now. And Paramahamsa Swami at the time was his secretary and my very good friend, and Nitai Das was his Sanskrit editor. And massage was always an active time. It wasn't just Prabhupada sitting. You know, Prabhupada utilized all of his time. So while getting massage, it was an excellent time for the secretary and the Sanskrit editor to come in and out at will, because doors open, Prabhupada's getting massage. Otherwise, no one just didn't knock on his door, walk in his room. It's not like if someone had a question, his secretary, editor, they wouldn't walk in. It was always Prabhupada ringing the bell. That meant the servant goes. And then he would say, get Shyamasundar, get Paramahamsa, do that. And then they would enter the room. But during that time, it was free, open. So I'm massaging Prabhupada, I'm behind him. Half of the massage, you're behind him because you're doing his head with sandalwood oil and rubbing his back. Could go on for half an hour just rubbing his back. It was his favorite place. And he definitely let me know. And it was the one time, it was a long time. I mean, he would give instructions a year later. He would say something about the massage. It wasn't that you just ended. Early on, I remember him massaging. And of course, you can become a little distant. You know, you're doing your service. And he grabbed my leg. He said, like this, and he starts kneading my leg. Yes, Prabhupada. So he massaged me for showing me what he wanted. And then the other time, you massage my back as hard as you can. And I said, I was 21 years old, you know. So it was a challenge. I thought, all right, and I'm massaging Prabhupada's back. And he's sitting on a floor just like this. It was a shiny wooden floor, and there's a straw mat on it, which is also slippery. But I'm sitting behind him on the floor, and I'm pushing and pushing. And he's sitting there like I'm not even with him. So I was waiting for that point, and he said, okay, that's the good, but he never said it. Anyway, I surrendered. He made me surrender. So definitely Guru was heavy. And then Nitai comes in. He offers obeisances. We all come in the room. You offer obeisances. If you're in there for 2 minutes, again, you offer your obeisances. So Nitai comes in, he offers obeisances, and he has a question on the Sanskrit. And Prabhupada answers it, and he leaves the room. A few minutes later, he comes back in, and he offers obeisances, but it was very quick. It kind of went down, and he was there for 5-6 seconds, and then he comes up, and he asks Prabhupada the question. And Prabhupada answers, and he leaves the room. And I always say, when I speak about Prabhupada, so many things are 3 times. There's always this 3-time thing. Well, sometimes he would ask me something, you know, would you like this? And would you like this? And there's always that 3rd, and that's the end. It doesn't go beyond 3. He comes in the room, puts his head on the ground 1 second, just down and up like that. And Prabhupada looks at him. He said, you offer your obeisances, he said. He's not hatchet. He went like that, you know, I'm behind him, he goes, phew. So the hatchet, you know, quite a symbol, you know, the hatchet. And that's what I immediately thought, he's just cutting his own. And of course it did happen. You know, it wasn't long after that he's asking Prabhupada for permission to go to Radhakund and take his guru, you know, his Swarup guru. And Prabhupada said, you know, I'm not sure actually what Prabhupada said. You may know better than me. But I heard it in a couple ways. He said, please give me your blessings, Prabhupada, to accept another guru. And Prabhupada said, you have I heard he said, you have my blessings to do business or to go to hell. Either one, he definitely, you know, it didn't work out very well for him, yeah. So that was a lesson. I said, if I went in his room with lunch and chapati, one after another, each time I went in, I would put it down on his plate, offer obeisances, and leave. I said, you know, within a day, maybe 20, 30, 40 times. He never said, you know, you had your quota today, you're okay. You know, you just did it. So when Paramahamsa Swami joined him as his secretary, when you would join Prabhupada, of course, there's nothing more exciting in the world than to travel with him, you know. So he was very excited. So he would come in, get Paramahamsa, I'd get him, and he'd offer his obeisances. He was tall, 6 foot tall, full figure. And boom, he'd go down. And then he'd start reciting some prayers, you know, to the spiritual master, besides the pranams. So again, Prabhupada let that go. Paramahamsa tells Prabhupada, the third time he went in, and down, doing full dandavats, and Prabhupada said, sit up. He said, how are we going to get anything done? You're lying on the floor. So he always knew how to deal with each individual. And is what I saw again and again with Prabhupada was, there was no, you know, the Vyasa-san, it was a formula. It was Shastra. And there wasn't anywhere, there was no movement. Shastra, that was it. But it was quite the opposite on the other side of his door. It was nothing but compassion, gratitude, forgiveness. You know, we use that nowadays sometimes. We say it's easier to get forgiveness than permission. Prabhupada never gave permission, you know, for certain things, but he always gave forgiveness, you know, over and over. Again, that's why, you know, I can say I feel confident, you know, going to temples. I feel like Prabhupada accepts me because of my understanding of how I've seen that acceptance over and over. You know, no matter what happens, it was always just keep trying. What's the alternative? So, this is 1975. So now I'm married, and I have a son. You know, I left Srila Prabhupada at the end of 1973, and my wife and I went off to Caracas. So within, I guess, 3 months later, she was pregnant with our son. Anyway, I wound back up with Srila Prabhupada after 8 months. So I traveled with him, and now we're in Los Angeles, and I have a son now that's just a few months old, 4 or 5 months old. And I'm traveling with Srila Prabhupada. So we get to Los Angeles, New Dwarka, and we're no sooner there in the afternoon. He says, get Nanda Kumar. Of course, Nanda Kumar was his servant just before me. And so I go across the street, I fetch Nanda, and of course it's always that excitement. You know, Prabhupada wants to see you excitement. And for those who are with him, like had been his servant or secretary, or especially servant, sometimes they say, Prabhupada wants to see you. It's, you know, what did I do? So I said, so we both go over, we offer our obeisances, and Prabhupada, you know, he said, get my white bag. So we opened Prabhupada's white bag, that's his briefcase. You know, it was small, it was half the size of a briefcase, and it's plastic, vinyl, with a zipper. And I say, I always liked, so I get the white bag, and I already know what's going on. And just being with Prabhupada, I mean, the white bag, it usually meant there's money and something's going to happen. So you have an idea. So I get the white bag, and we're both sitting there, not saying anything, and Prabhupada always, everything he did was so deliberate. You know, he didn't just like hold the bag and zoom, you know, zoom. Like he puts the bag down. Like it was all, you could watch every movement he made. He put it, then he put his, you know, everything seemed delicate and graceful. And then he opened it up. So he takes out a crisp $50 bill. It's 1975. $50 bill was, you know, now what do they say? It would be like $500. I guess it's 10 times now. So I accepted it. No, and again, I had learned from Prabhupada. I'm serving him. He gave me so many things over 2 years, so many items, everything from blankets, sweaters, socks. Just took care of us. So now, he said, this is for your son, and he hands me the $50. So I accepted it. Thank you, Srila Prabhupada. Then he looks at Nanda Kumar and he takes out another crisp $50 bill and he says, this is for your son. So immediately Nanda Kumar, Prabhupada, I can't take money from you, you know, spiritual master. He looks at him, he said, not for you. He said, it's for your son. Yes, Prabhupada. So I avoided that part of it, you know. I just thought, yes, Prabhupada, in appreciation. But he was, you know, he was always showing his appreciation, you know. He was reciprocating. It's our very, it's what being a devotee is about. It's the exchanges. Prabhupada engaged with it with his disciples. Who else was he going to do, you know? So he would, especially being with him, he dealt with you very personally. You know, you're with him. He's a person. So sometimes you were just his, you know, his friend to talk to say things to. And of course, that was very, very pleasurable, you know, when he allowed you in that space. But you knew he was allowing you, and it wasn't all the time. You know, it was there when it was there. And then you're always the servant. And what I always experienced, everything was connected, not just as a servant, but it's when you're doing your service. He was always talking to me when I was massaging him, obviously. So I always felt a very direct reciprocation that I was doing something. Like he said, massage, he said, passive wrestling. He said, you do all the work, I get all the benefit. Okay. One very difficult time was in 1974. It's when Prabhupada was going for the opening of the Krishna Balaram Mandir. It was supposed to be on Janmashtami. So he arrived there. And of course, the temple was nowhere near an opening, which got established very quickly. And Prabhupada remained there, and he got very ill. If you remember at that time, it's the first time we were actually chanting 24 hours a day in the temple room. It went on for weeks. And I would literally, I would put my arms, you know, my arms under Prabhupada's shoulder blades to walk him into the bathroom, back out of the bathroom, sitting in the bed like that, day after day after day. And he's eating a little orange. One day, weeks into it, he said to me, I think I'm feeling some appetite. He said, make some upma. Now, Jamuna is there. And I said to him, Jamuna is here, I'll have her. No, he said, I like your upma. He said, you make it, which shocked me, you know, and pleased me to unimaginable. So I go in and I say the exact same thing. I said, Prabhupada wants upma, Jamuna. Wonderful, she said, I'll get right on it. And I said, Jamuna, he asked me to make it. And she's such a wonderful devotee. Immediately, who could cook like Jamuna? Immediately she said, what do you need me to do? This was Jamuna, you know. No, there was like no ego at all. Like, well, he wants you, you know. No, he said, well, how can I help? She said, this is what she was the one doing everything. Anyway, it was all we had were dehydrated peas. And I made it. I brought it into Prabhupada, you know, on his plate, just a bowl. And I left the room. So we're all outside Prabhupada's door. This is what we just sit there and listen what you can hear. I think I was eating. Anyway, I hear a little ding, 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 ding. I go back in, I offer obeisances, I sit up and I see this bowl. It doesn't look like he ate anything. Like a child, it looked a little moved around, maybe had a bite. Literally, it looked like, you know, what a child would do. And as soon as I look up, he already knows what I'm thinking. Now, he's not even eating. And he looked at me. I want you to know, he said, it was very, very good. He said, but I have no appetite. He said, I thought if I had you make it something I really liked, my appetite. He said, but I don't have appetite. He said, but it was very good. So his only concern was he saw that I was upset that he didn't eat. Nothing about how he's feeling. And it was always like that. He'd be lying there and, you know, did you take prasadam? Did you get your shower? Did you do like this? So then that evening, it's hot. This is September, August in Vrindavan. So he would sleep on his, in the garden, Krishna Balaram Mandir, which there wasn't a garden, nothing was finished. But his rooms were 90% done. But he would sleep outside for the coolness. So he had a typical Indian bed with this mosquito net over it. And the mosquito net went down. They had made the surface with bricks, just laid them down. So I would massage him under the mosquito net, and then I would go under his bed and sleep there because the mosquito net protected me from the mosquitoes as well. So one night about 1 o'clock in the morning, I hear a noise. And I'm lying on the ground, and I'm just looking at Prabhupada lying on the ground. So of course I roll out and I pick him up and I sit him on the bed. And Prabhupada, what happened? He said, he said I had to pass, and I thought I had enough strength. He said, I didn't want to disturb you. He said, but I have no strength. And I'm Prabhupada. I said, I'm lying under your bed. I was chastising him. I said, I'm just lying under here waiting to do something. But he was always like that. If you were sleepy, he didn't even want to wake you up. You know, this is his way. So then I got malaria. So now I'm literally deathly ill. You know, everyone's taking care of themselves. One day he walks through the door. I'm lying in the servants' quarters. They're eating prasadam. 3-4 devotees are eating prasadam. I'm lying on the floor. I mean, in very bad shape. Prabhupada's walking through to go to his bathroom, and he said, is anyone taking care of Srutakirti? And I'm like, yeah, finally. He said, get him a bed to lie in, call the doctor, bring him some Nimbu Pani. And unless he had said it, I don't know what would have happened over the next 48 hours. But he said, take care of him. And so that happened, and I got better, but I was always ill. So finally I said, Brahmananda, I said, I want to go, I'm going to leave. You know, I said, I got to leave. I want to go back to the West. So, he said, I'll talk to Prabhupada. What I didn't know was when he went to do it, I'm in the room. I was very, I was always afraid to face Prabhupada with my issues. I had no problem taking care of him, but when it came to something, couldn't do it. So I'm thinking he's arranging everything. I go in the room, and when I go in, he says, Prabhupada, Srutakirti wants to go back to the US for his health. And I'm like, oh man. So now I'm sitting, and Prabhupada looks at me. I'm right in front of me. He says, so, you know, he said, you need to go for your health? I said, well, Prabhupada, I said, yes, I think so. I said, I've been so sick. I said, is it all right? He looked at me. He said, all right. He said, you saved my life. He said, of course. He said, go back. He said, get your health. He says, we're going to be coming very soon. He said, then I'll meet you back in Los Angeles and you resume your activities. He said, but absolutely. I mean, I was feeling so distressed. And he just, again, he just made you feel everything's all right. Whether it was or not wasn't the issue. It was, he didn't want you to feel bad. He just wanted to encourage you. So then, that afternoon goes by. Every night I'm taking Prabhupada out. He's sitting in a rocking chair under the tamal tree, listening to his disciples give class. And I'm sitting on the marble floor next to him. So we're at Krishna Balaram Mandir, under a tamal tree, sitting next to Prabhupada on the floor in the temple. And I'm thinking, what a fool am I, you know, like, Prabhupada, it's beautiful. So I said, Prabhupada, I'm not going to go. You know, I said, I'll manage. And he looked at me. He said, that's very nice, he said. And he said, and because, he said, of your sincerity, he said, Krishna will take care of everything. And the next day, Bali Mridang comes from New York, unbeknownst to me at all. And he comes into the servants' quarters with a suitcase, you know, suitcase, regular old, and he opens it up and he's like, this is for you. And it's filled with nuts, dried fruits, oats, like everything I dream about while I'm in India. And I'm there, oh. I said, oh, thank you. I said, for Prabhupada. He said, no, no, no. He said, I brought it for you. And I'm like, huh? He said, no, I just thought, you know, you. So, I mean, Prabhupada, you know, that's Prabhupada. And Krishna. And Prabhupada said, yeah, Krishna. And he knew, you know, he knew everything. But, you know, just seeing his satisfaction when you could say something like that, it was very nice, he said. But he wasn't going to tell me, which he always dealt with me like that. Never told me what to do. He always said things in such a way, I have to make choices. We're flying from, well, this is in Europe, of course. I can't even say for sure, maybe Paris.
That's okay.
Going somewhere through Paris to England like that. Anyway, we're on the plane. I always say the most fun that I had with Prabhupada was when he traveled, because you never knew what to expect. You never knew what he would say, what he would do. The situations were always unique. So the one time we're on the plane, and I always say when Prabhupada got up and get off, he would always put his garland on, he'd put fresh tilak on. He's going to see his disciples. He's Vaishnava. He always presented himself very beautifully. Straightened and put his bead bag, he'd hang it, straighten his cloth, his everything. So, but this, and he would always leave space. Prabhupada never stood right behind someone. That's, you know, he always left 3-4 feet. And he would walk like that, right behind. But this time, you know, he's right close. And there's a woman in front of him, pretty lady. She was Italian from Italy. And Prabhupada turns to his disciple and he says, she is very pretty. And she overheard him. And she turns back, big smile. She said, oh, thank you. He says, no. He said, it's not a compliment. He said, it's just a fact. So Prabhupada could say things that we wouldn't dare to say, you know, to come up, say, you know, you're walking with, say, oh, she's a really beautiful girl. But Prabhupada could say it because he had no material desires inside. He was seeing Krishna can make such beautiful things, you know. So he said it very innocently. Often I say Prabhupada was, you know, behind the door, you know, when he's not on the Vyasasan, he was very childlike, you know, often. And not childish, it was childlike. There was just a very sweet innocence that just drew you in more and more. You know, you just wanted to be with him. You wanted to be like that. I wanted, and one of the reasons I was with him for so long, because I actually found being with him very peaceful. His room was always peaceful. He'd be reading his books, chanting rounds, you know, on his beads, walking around, you know, telling us, this is what you do, he said. You know, a very simple process. While Prabhupada was staying in Juhu, of course, every morning he would go for his walk. Sometimes he would take a little ride, but usually he would just go right to the beach. It was a block away. So every day you could set your watch by Prabhupada, you know, for the morning walk with the sunrise. So he'd come down the stairs, and of course he gets out the door, there's 20, 30 devotees there, which is a lot. You know, they're all living there in Juhu. And everyone's offering obeisances, you know, down on the ground. But there was a young boy, and he was standing like this, just had his hands folded. And Prabhupada just kept walking, and he looked at me. He said, this is the beginning of his fall down. Just like that one item. And then he just walked on. So that's why I say it was always very important to never lose that focus of who you were dealing with, because it was easy, you know, it wasn't a difficult thing. And of course, you know, when you were with him, you would get to see it with yourself, and you could see it with others. And he would do his best to cure it. You know, Prabhupada would, so many times he called us into the room, tell us to, you know, wake up, stop sleeping. You know, he could have just ignored all of it, but he knew he had to keep us focused, especially being with him. We're staying at Kartikeya Mahadevi's. He was one of Prabhupada's first assistants there in Bombay from the very beginning. He gave Prabhupada his whole flat for Prabhupada and all of his entourage. And it was on the 3rd floor, and there was literally an elevator for 2 people could fit on it. It was like a one-man elevator, but 2 people could fit in there. And every day we're going on the morning walk, we're going, hopping in the elevator with Prabhupada and Shamasundar. We'd go down, a slow elevator. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj arrived, who I really didn't know at that time. This was my first meetings with him. And we go out the door together. We all 3 of us come out. So Prabhupada's getting into the elevator, and of course I'm his servant. I'm just following right behind like I did all the time. And of course Tamal, he said, "You're not going down there with Prabhupada." And I go, "Oh, all right, I just, okay." So the door closes. So of course I just trot down the stairs, 2 flights of stairs, and the elevator's, so I'm there waiting. Then the door opens, and Tamal, he said, "Prabhupada, Srutakirti is already here." Prabhupada looks at him, he said, "Kirti means expert." So for me, I always say one of the best things was massaging Prabhupada in the evening. Anywhere. India was the best because you would have to sit in bed with him rather than kneel on the floor and massage him. You're sitting in the bed because you have the mosquito net around you. So it was very, very personal, intimate. And no one ever enters the room. Again, like afternoon massage, evening, that's it. It's just you and him, which feels very nice. Imagine, you're just alone with Prabhupada. And what was more incredible was sometimes he would talk. I'd be massaging him thinking, he's talking to me, like there's no one else around, it's just me. It was very hard for me to accept that he would do that, like, why, But he did. And of course I loved it. And this particular evening is in Juhu, and Prabhupada went on for like half an hour just telling stories about his childhood. And when Prabhupada tells you things, he's there, and he does it in such a way. I mean, talk about a speaker. Prabhupada, he would assume the characters, he would put his everything, his intonation, his emotion, like the different people when he would say it. So you were watching a one-act play, or a one-man play, one transcendental person saying everything. But he loved talking about his childhood. You could tell he had a very wonderful childhood. He had parents that loved him very, very much, and he expresses that often. He particularly, the more I see, he spent a lot of time with his father. He always talks, in these stories, he was with his father, he was with his father, and his father took him to the store, and his father did this. You could see how much he admired his father. And the one night he's talking about his mother, and how she cooked, what a good cook she was. And my sister, he said, she's also an excellent cook. My mother taught her. And then he said, I'm also excellent cook. He said, but I learned by watching. No one teaching. He would say that in different areas. He would express his, we could say his pride, his transcendental pride. That he didn't need teachers. He could just watch things and learn. That's what he told me. So then he was talking about him and his father. And he said, that night he had puffed rice. He specifically told me, he said, make puffed rice. He said, last night, he said, he would ask for puris and sabji 9 o'clock at night, which he did the night before. He said, last night, he said, that was too heavy. He said, I had difficulty getting up to do my translating work. It was so sweet. He's still getting up at midnight, he's saying, but maybe it was harder to get up at midnight than it was the night before. And then he said, my mother, she made excellent puffed rice. He described the whole process. Then he starts talking about other things. And then he says, he said, one night, he said, I told my mother, you make me puris. And she said, no. She said, it's too late. She said, I'll make you muri, puffed rice. Of course, Prabhupada, no was not that was not in his vocabulary. And you can imagine, Prabhupada, no, I don't know, maybe he's 5 years old, maybe he's 8 years old. Anyway, he wants his puris. He said, I want puris. And again, she said, no. She said, I'll give you, something else. What else? So the third time, he says, I want puris. He said, then my father said, if he wants puris, you give him puris. And he looked at me. He said, perhaps my father knew There's only one other time that I remember he said made such a profound statement, and then he would stop. He would never say anything more. You had to understand. He expected you had enough intelligence to know what he meant. So the other time was after he went around the world, 2 months. He started in Juhu and he wound up back in Mayapur for the festival in 1975. So after going to a dozen temples, he arrives in Mayapur. 75, so the Lotus building is done. His rooms are nice, everything, and we go into the rooms after the greeting, and Prabhupada's sitting behind his desk. Jaipataka Maharaj is there, Bhavananda's there, Atreya Rishi's there, I'm there. So right away, one of Jaipataka Maharaj's qualities, as soon as he would see Prabhupada first time, he would offer very nice prayers, different mantras and things he would say to Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada's saying is very beautiful. It was beautiful. He loved that building, that he designed. It had the windows on both sides, the breezes in Mayapur would blow through. So he's saying it's very nice. And then Jaipataka said, Prabhupada, it's all you. You have done this. And Prabhupada said, well, he said, Krishna has given an idea, he said, and, he is fulfilled. And then he says, it's all the mercy of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He said it was his desire. He said this. He said, and Srila Prabhupada, he said his desire, meaning his spiritual master. And then he said, Bhaktivinoda Thakur predicted that this would happen, that a personality would go who would bring people from all the different countries all over the world. This is in his room, he's saying this. He said he predicted that. He said, that person I may be. And then he looked at Jaipataka. He said, so what types of bananas have you planted? So he would say, and that was it, and if you were there and could receive it and could understand, it was fine. But if you couldn't, that's okay too. He said, what bananas? And then he said, and these cows. This I find very interesting too. Because nowadays, we have a whole other category now. If it's not I don't even know what it is, some Sarabi cow or something, you shouldn't even drink that milk. So Prabhupada said, these cows, he said, I'm thinking you should get a cow from the West because they can tolerate, they give more milk. He said, these cows here, they can tolerate the heat. From the West, they cannot tolerate the heat. He said, but they give lots of milk. He said, so maybe you put the two together. So he's telling them that you take the Sarabi cow and you mix it with these Western cows. But now we're at the point it's become just the opposite. And unless you can get milk from a cruelty-free Sarabi cow, you shouldn't drink milk. So but that was never Prabhupada's idea. He had much other ideas. But the amazing thing was him saying that person I may be. And that was, and it's very obvious. But in all his humility, he couldn't even say such a thing, but he let us know. Satsvarup Maharaj, he had the unique position of getting a few days of training to be Prabhupada's servant from me, because after being with Prabhupada for 16 months, it's the very end of 1973 in New Dwarka, Los Angeles, and I just got married, decided to leave Prabhupada and get married. So I'm still there in Los Angeles, I'm still doing service. And Prabhupada decided he was tired of getting these young men who get married on him and leave him. So he thinks, I'll get a Maharaj. He took Satsvarup Maharaj as his servant, literally as his servant, not secretary, maybe both, but servant. Very distinct services. So Satsvarup Maharaj, being like he was, he said to me, he sat me down, he asked me so many questions. I told him everything I was doing, how I was doing it. It was January, so it's cold. I told him how I put Prabhupada's long underwear on him. I described the massage, the times, everything, and he's taking notes, So he says, can I, I'd like to sit in, I can watch you give a massage to Prabhupada. I'm there, sure, No one showed me how to do massage. No one showed me how to do anything. So this is wonderful that he's getting some training. Sure. So we're in there, and I'm massaging Prabhupada. And Prabhupada's just sitting. He's not saying anything. I'm massaging, and Satsup's sitting there, and he's got his notepad, and I guess he's writing things down. And so like 20 minutes or so goes by, and Prabhupada just sitting. And then he looks at him. He said, what are you doing? And he said, oh, well, Prabhupada, he said, I'm taking notes, he said, on how to give the massage. And Prabhupada said, that's like trying to learn how to swim on land. And then he put his notebook down and sat there. And then he said to me months later, he said, you told me how to help and dress him, and because I helped him, He said, I went in there, he said, I was trying to put on his long underwear. And Prabhupada said, no, I'll do it. He said, I don't know. He said, maybe I wasn't getting it right. I said, I don't know. I said, but Prabhupada was fast. You had to be fast. When you put his shoes on, he didn't stop. Going on the morning walk, he put one foot, you'd have to be sliding it in. I had a shoehorn, we had everything ready, And then his next step was out the door, so that the next shoe wasn't next to his foot, it was actually in front of it, because he was always moving, like he said. So if you couldn't get that together, and at times, people are always saying, could I put Prabhupada, can I do this, can I do this? And the shoe part, I remember one day letting someone do it, right there in New Dwarka. He said, can I? I said, yeah, okay. And Prabhupada's there like that, and I thought, oh no. That was the last time. That was the last time that happened. Yeah. On one trip from Delhi, Prabhupada was headed to, he usually traveled west. But from Delhi, we went to Bangkok, which is almost 10 hours. And then he was going to have another 10-hour flight. So we get to the airport, we're sitting in a transit lounge, and we were changing airlines, everything. We had to go through customs, immigration. After flying 10 hours, maybe Prabhupada, I'm not sure what his health was at that situation, but when we were sitting down in transit, he said to me, I need to take bath. He said, I have to refresh. He said, I feel I need to refresh. It was like a feeling, he said. He said, can you get my things? And the suitcases were right over there because they were getting transferred through customs. So I opened up his suitcase and get everything, which meant I had to get a gamsha, I had to get a towel, his lota. There's no showers. He wanted to bathe. Like we're walking into a shower, walking into a bathroom that's the size of a factory, big 20 sinks, toilets, urinals, people in and out constantly. And so I get everything and we go in. So I'm waiting for him, of course. I don't know how we're going to do this. And he said, okay. He said, well, go by the sink. He said, you fill. So he tells me, Prabhupada tells you what to do. So we're in a very public men's room in the airport. And I'm literally like bathing. It's like an Abhishek ceremony going on. Prabhupada's squatting and I'm bathing him. Just, he's soaping. And people are walking in, passing urine, going to toilets, washing their hands, and there's an attendant there. Not doing anything, but he's there, and he's visibly unhappy, let's say. His water's splashing all over the floor. And Prabhupada, it's like we were in his room, I mean, Prabhupada was on such a different level than everyone else. Sometimes you noticed it, like I always say traveling with him was the most fun because he was just so aloof from everyone. He always just did things the way he wanted. And if someone said things, his tendency was he didn't hear even. He didn't understand English, he didn't hear, whatever it was, he'd just go on his way. He didn't care. He didn't have anyone to impress or feel shame from, nothing. He had no desires other than to serve. And this was part of it, He said, I have to refresh. So we go do everything. It was wonderful in a sense, here we are. And I got the it's the only time I did a Abhishek to him when I was with him as his servant. It was pretty special. And then I help him, dress, puts on his dhoti kurta, and we head out. So of course, as we're heading out, this attendant's at the door, and I don't know what he's saying in his Thai language, he's just going off, And again, Prabhupada, obviously he heard him, but he's just walking out. So I'm walking behind Prabhupada. And when I was with Prabhupada, of course, I did not at all have that aloof mentality that he had. Sometimes I would become, I just wanted to hide, hate to admit it, I was a rascal. I didn't see things the way he did. I was always concerned what others were thinking. So I'm falling behind, and as we get out, I said, Prabhupada, I said, this guy's really ticked off, and he said, yes, I know. He said, I had to bathe, and that was it. He knew what he had to do, and he did it, and that's the way Prabhupada was. If something needed to be done, he just did it. There was nothing to interfere with it. So even we were in the most public place ever, for him it was just did what he did. We get back on the plane, and Prabhupada lays down. His head would be at the window. Planes were never very crowded then, so usually if we would get the 3 seats, then after everything was done, we'd let Prabhupada sit by himself, and we'd sit behind him or on the next aisle, things like that. I was generally right there. But this time we were all sitting behind him. So he said he wanted to rest. So he lays down with his head on a pillow, at the window seat. But he lays down fully. So his feet are hanging into the aisle like that much. His pink lotus feet, just there. And people are walking for half an hour. People are walking by Prabhupada's feet, and they're touching him. Not with their hands, but they're rubbing up against Prabhupada's feet. So we're behind, we're just giggling, thinking, these people don't even know what's going on here. They have no idea the mercy that Prabhupada's giving them, And he didn't move, he just let them out there for them for a while. So you never know where the mercy comes. While we were in Australia, there were many different items there that we got that, not previously, so many milk products. Like England, it had so much cream, clabbered cream, sour creams, whole milks, ghee, everything available. And fruits were also very nice. They had from the north, many tropical fruits. So for the first time, it was the first time I saw, and apparently it was the first time Prabhupada saw, I brought him his breakfast one day, and one of the fruits I just cut in half. It was open. It was a passion fruit, lilikoi. I come in as usual, put it down on Prabhupada's table and offer obeisances, and he sits down and he goes, what is that? And he's looking, pointing at the passion fruit. And I said, oh, it's passion fruit, Prabhupada. He looks, he says, will I become passionate if I eat? I just laughed. What do you say? That was Prabhupada. Will I become passionate if I eat that? One of the most difficult times for me, again, I was with Prabhupada for 8 months now, traveling with him. And I was struggling after being with him for 8 months. Many different things happened. One of them was one afternoon. So now after all this time traveling around the world with Prabhupada, I very much began taking naps, which was something I had never done. But now whenever Prabhupada would take a nap after lunch, I would take a nap as well, because I was always trying to catch up on sleep in travels. So this one day after lunch, Prabhupada's napping and I'm sleeping, I say sleeping like a baby, sound asleep, which was, after 5 minutes, it's bam, gone. Anyway, I don't know how much time went by, but I hear the bell ring. And of course I know it's not going to be good. So I'm very, very sleepy, just filled with the mode of ignorance. And I go into the room and I'm trying to figure out how to look alert when I go in. And I offer my obeisances, so I'm on the ground and I'm exercising my eyelids, and Prabhupada's yelling, I've been ringing the bell for hours. He said, why aren't you chanting? And when he said that freaked me out. I wasn't. And he knew it. He knew everything. Sometimes he would let me know what he knew, but he always knew. And looking back, I wonder how he could tolerate my being around. Why aren't you chanting? I was so bewildered. I didn't know what to say, and I said what came to my head, which was, Prabhupada, I'm just sitting in my room all day, waiting for something to do. And he looked at me, he said, I'm also sitting in my room all day. He said, but every morning, he said, I go for a morning walk. He said, We both go together. We walk, we chant. He said, we're outside. He said, then we come back. I said, Prabhupada, I said, you're like Haridas Thakur. I said, it's very difficult for me just to sit in my room all day. And he said, well, what are we going to do? And I go, something, I don't know. What I found so amusing was what I said to him. My reason for not chanting was I have too much time on my hands. But he just said, what are we going to do? He didn't say, then if you have so much time, why can't you chant your rounds? He could have immediately attacked me, but he never did that. He said, what are we going to do? How to solve it? And of course, I don't know. Call Kurandar. It was Prabhupada. You heard that a lot in New Dwarka. Call Kurandar. Call Kurandar, he said. He said, as a background, there in New Dwarka, when I first was with him, I remember we would go down the stairs from his room, go down the hallway, out the back door into his garden. And one day we're going down, I've got his goblet of water and his plate, and we're going down and following behind him. Goes down, we open the door, and he goes down one stair. You know, this stair was concrete step. And he says, you know that? See that? He said, the stair? And I'm looking, yes, Prabhupada. He said, Kurandar made that. He said, Kurandar can do anything. So that was Prabhupada's vision of Kurandar. He could do anything. So I called Kurandar, and he was very, very serious. We say, looked like a Marine, was a Marine, and he was a Hare Krishna Marine fellow. He was very, very serious. So I get him, we both go to Prabhupada's room, we offer obeisances, and Kurandar sits up. That look, you know that look? Looking at Prabhupada, waiting, and Prabhupada said, so, he said, Srutakirti, whom sitting right there beside him. He said, Srutakirti, he said, he's not getting his rounds done. And he says he's not getting them done because he's sitting in his room and he doesn't have enough to do. Very seriously, he's saying, there's not one iota of sarcasm in his voice. And I'm just sitting watching all this going on. I'm like totally bewildered, you know. Still trying to wake up, but I'm very alert now. And I can't imagine where all this is going. And he looks at Kurandar and he says, so what can we do? Kurandar immediately becomes even more grave looking, and he's, you know, and Prabhupada, of course, I know what to do. And this is all part of this particular pastime. So he said, I'm translating here. He said, Srimad Bhagavatam. He said, can you get another dictaphone machine? Yes, Prabhupada. You get a dictaphone machine? He said, you can put it in the other sitting room. He said, and I'll begin translating Chaitanya Charitamrita. And he looks at me, he said, you know how to type? He knew I knew how to type. I said, yes, Prabhupada. He said, so after the morning walk, you come in, he said, you get the tape, you sit down with the typewriter, and he said, then you can transcribe. He said, you'll have something to do. He says, and then you can get your rounds done. He says, is that okay? Yes, Prabhupada. I was just happy. He's giving me all this attention. I couldn't believe it. He looks at Kurandar, is that okay? Yes, Prabhupada. So you can go get it? Yes, Prabhupada. An hour later, a dictaphone machine, 1973. It's, like I said, you can't, wire Amazon or anything like that. But he got it. He was Kurandar. It was all set up. The next morning, we're on the morning walk. I'm chanting furiously because I'm thinking, I don't know, this is going to take a long time. I have to cook. All of a sudden, I had too much to do. I went from sitting to like, now I'm chanting like any fury. So I got my rounds done. I go back, I get the tape, I transcribe it. It's Chaitanya Charitamrita. And the next day, no tape. Next day, no tape. Next day, no tape. He did it the one day for me. But every day, I'm now chanting my rounds every day. He fixed me. He cured my problem. Just because he showed me he cared. Nothing else really mattered. It was just to see. Even me, he's taking care of me, Everybody else I saw, everyone's doing so much stuff. I'm sitting in a room complaining, but he's taking care of me. He's fixing me. That was Prabhupada. Never made you feel bad. Never. And he would never bring up a past incident where you did something wrong. He never rubbed the past in your face. We were always dealing with the present moment. Yeah. One of the opportunities where Prabhupada chastised us the most was our sleeping. When we were sleeping, whether it was early in the morning, Mangalarti time, or it was in the late morning, if it was in the afternoon, if he knew we were sleeping, you could expect he would let you know he knew. Now, one time was in Sydney, Perth, Australia. So when we went through the Australian tour, we were traveling a lot. So there was a lot of time being on the planes, time zones, flying. So by the time we got to where we were, I guess we were a little tired. Or anyway, we're in Australia, so eating very opulent prasadam, like I say, lots and lots of dairy products that they used. So this particular day, the room we're staying in, it was belonged to a devotee's parents. It was like a, what do you call, vacation cottage. So this one we were using as our bedroom, had an actual picture window that exposed what was our bedroom. Prabhupada was in his own room. Anyway, I hear the bell ringing in the afternoon, and I go in, and Prabhupada's saying, it was one of his lines, I've been ringing this bell for hours. Everyone's sleeping like dead men. He said, all like dead men. He said, the karmis aren't sleeping. Prabhupada used that word. Karmis aren't, he said, they're all working very hard for their sex life, but not our devotees. He said, sleeping very, very comfortably. He said, call them. Well, that was always the thing, call them. So I go in, wake up Paramahamsa. Prabhupada wants to see us. He's mad. I wasn't even happy for what was about to happen. And then I go to the boys, these young brahmacharis. I said, Prabhupada wants to see you. Of course, they're smiling. They couldn't wait to see Prabhupada. Now I'm thinking, we'll see. So we get into, now we're all four of us are sitting in there, and Prabhupada gives the exact same, all sleeping like dead men, he said, rascals. Everyone's out working very hard, he said, for their life, sex life. He kept, everyone, these men working so hard, but not my disciples. He's very nicely sleeping, he said. Sleeping. He said, go and sleep. That was the worst thing he could have done. He told, so now we all walk out of our room with the heads down, and we go in, and now everyone's sitting there, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. A couple minutes go by and the bell rings. We go back in for obeisances. Prabhupada looks at one of the young boys. He said, get a book and read. Of course, they're all his books behind him. By now, 75, maybe a dozen books. He said, take one book and begin reading. He said, we'll have class. So he was, right away, he was straightening us out. He was showing, just because we're in this house, doesn't mean the program isn't there. So, of course, it always happens. The boy, which book, Prabhupada? Any book. So he grabs Bhagavad Gita, takes it, puts it. Where should I read? Anywhere. He wouldn't even let him speak. I heard this man. This was Prabhupada's mood. There's no special place. It's everywhere you go. He said, Krishna's like a sweet ball. Everywhere you bite, it's sweet. So then, of course, he started reading right away. A few days later, it happens again. These boys aren't there. Now we're in Fiji. More traveling. And Paramahamsa and I, we're just knocked out. And we're resting. It's morning. It's like 10 in the morning after breakfast. But we're sleeping. And the bell rings. Why are you sleeping? I would never give a response. I'd just look at, because whatever response I would give, he would, smash it. I knew that. I just kind of look. Where's Paramahamsa? He's resting, Prabhupada. Call him. He's a Maharaj. So now I go to Paramahamsa. Again, Prabhupada wants to see her. I said, Paramahamsa, he's really mad, we're sleeping. But I don't say anything else. I don't know what to say. So we both go in. All for obeisance. Prabhupada looks at him. Why are you sleeping? Prabhupada, jet lag. Prabhupada said, I'm also flying with you. He said, I have no jet lag. He said, you're a sannyasi. He said, you're supposed to be reducing your sleeping and eating. He said, not more. He said, this is our business. And he said, all right. He said, go. And we left. So Prabhupada, there was always that, everything was there, you know, the mercy was there, the compassion was there, but also the rules, the regulations of how we could improve were there. And he always knew when we were starting to drift away. So he would always bring us back with that, just try to wake us up, not just from sleeping, you know, the reality of sleeping, but all our sleep. You know, we didn't have the consciousness, you know, we didn't understand what Prabhupada was doing. At least I didn't. I can say I definitely did not understand the vision Prabhupada had of how easy it was to fall away. How that one thing, he would always say that one little thing you start with, and it very quickly escalates, you know. I say when I was with Prabhupada as a brahmachari for 16 months, but I mentioned after 8 months I definitely had a struggle. And it was arriving to Los Angeles, which could help. It helped my struggle become even more difficult. To describe Prabhupada getting off the plane was always one of the most exciting things for his disciples, waiting in the airport at the gate, who hadn't seen him 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, whatever, never saw Prabhupada before. But that's what we all lived off of, right? It was serving Prabhupada. So as we're getting off the plane, this particular day, I was so deep in my self-pity of how bad I felt, how miserable I was. I was in Maya, wasn't happy, and I'm traveling with Prabhupada for almost a year, and all this is all I feel. And he's right next to me. And now he's right in front of me, getting ready to get off the plane, and as each person gets off, it means he's almost off. So Kirtan gets more and more exciting. It's everything you want in Krishna consciousness, that anticipation of the separation is there that's going to be broken any second. Imagine that feeling. I couldn't. I never had it. You know, for a long, now I have it all the time, or hopefully every now and then. But then I never had it. I was always behind Prabhupada as he's getting off, never on the other side waiting to see him. And that made me feel worse, because how happy everyone was, and I'm not happy. So Prabhupada hits the doorway. Of course, everyone's jumping up and down, falling on the ground, crying, laughing, screaming, chanting, beating on drums and cartels. And I'm just behind him, walking with his white bag and holding another bag in this hand, and don't feel anything, not a drop of anything except misery. Really, I was so bad. So then everything carries on. We, get to his room. It's in the morning around 11. So there's so much to do for me at this time. I have to unpack his bags, have to prepare the lunch, have to get ready for the massage. Everything's going on. But I'm feeling horrible. So finally I'm massaging Prabhupada, and we're alone. And I felt so bad. I'm behind him again. I'm always behind him. Can't face Prabhupada and talk to him. And I said, Prabhupada, I said, you arrived here. I said, seeing all the devotees, everyone's in ecstasy. They have so much love for you. I said, they're dancing and crying. And I said, Prabhupada, I said, I don't feel anything. I don't feel any love. I don't feel anything. And again, in my self-pity, I was waiting for, I guess, the usual. Prabhupada comforting me, helping me, making me feel better, even without my asking. Now I was literally begging for Prabhupada, help me. Nothing happened. He just got quiet. For an hour more, I'm massaging Prabhupada. He doesn't say one word. As far as I could tell, he didn't even look at me. So now I thought I was depressed before. You can imagine how I felt. Telling Prabhupada, I have no feeling for you. And I'm his servant. Yes. And then when I look back, I think I had to be out of my mind to even say such a thing to him. I don't even know what made me say it. You can imagine how I felt. I would never speak such a thing, but I did. I felt so bad. And but nothing happened. And I go back. I have to lay out all his clothes on the bed, set up the cooker. While I'm massaging, the cooker's cooking in the other room, for an hour and a half, and you have to make that perfect. Imagine steaming a vegetable for an hour and a half and it's not mush. I don't know who did it. Somebody was in the cooker because it happened every day. I would have it on such a low flame. I learned, that was my expertise with Prabhupada, is always fine-tuning. Probably one of the reasons I was around, because I would try to, I wasn't inventive, I wasn't creative, but I could do what was getting done. And even as cooker, I made my own little dual, what do you call it, the tiffin. I made an inner tiffin in the cooker with a thing for the dal and a thing for the rice, so I could put wet vegetable on the bottom and the dal wouldn't burn if it was there too long. So that I could do, those kind of things. Anyway, he didn't say anything, so I get his whole lunch ready. I serve him his lunch, normal process, in and out the room several times. Then after his lunch, I transfer the plate, I distribute all the prasadam. All this time, he hasn't said one word to me. So I'm feeling pretty insignificant, useless, you name it, and anything bad, I was feeling it. I've exposed my total maya. I'm in total maya to Prabhupada. He takes a nap. I'm sitting in the room, and I hear the bell ring. And I go in, and I'm not in such a bad mood as I was. For, time passes, right? Moods come. We did learn that. Hopefully, we learned that. Modes of nature. But I go in, I offer obeisances, and I sit up. And he looks at me. He said, "Do you like your service?" I said, "Yes, Prabhupada." Immediately, everything was like it was, "Yes, Prabhupada." He said, "Well, service is love." He said, "Just do your service." He said, "Everything will be all right." He said, "The service is love." He said, "Everyone, it doesn't matter." He said, "They can jump up and down." He said, "That's nice." He said, "But the service is love." He said, "Just do your service. Everything will be all right." But that was Prabhupada again. And I've had some people who hear, every time they see me in a room, they'll ask for that story. It's very significant to know. We're not doing service to feel anything. We just want to do service. That's the point of service. We're not looking for ecstasy. That's conditional. Unconditional service means even when you're miserable, not feeling anything, you just carry on. That's the British, carry on. When I say carry on, anyway. So that was Prabhupada, just carry on, do your service. And of course, 45 years later, we see that. We just carry on. And I can see that in separation is definitely, it's a requirement. Obviously, Krishna is always separating himself from us to increase our love. It's going on, it's never going to stop. So I just hope at some point, Prabhupada allows us to free from separation for some time. So this is what we're all praying for. He is very kind, very merciful, and full of love for all of us. And that's what I learned, Just like some of us, I know people I'm very close to, we feel, unlovable. Prabhupada showed all of us, every one of us, he turned unlovables into lovables. George Harrison, I got to meet him a few times at the Manor in 1973, August, September. And he would come to see Prabhupada, just like everybody else did, just in total humility and affection and excitement. To see him, to see George like nervous, but to see Prabhupada was a lot of fun. He was very tiny, George, but his humility was explosive. He was just a wonderful person. I had no, personal contact with him much, but I, talked to him a few times. And anyway, he's in Prabhupada's room, come to see Prabhupada. Prabhupada, you had to rub George's head. It was like he would want to rub his head. And he offers obeisances, he's sitting down, and immediately Prabhupada says, "Bring him prasadam," which was all prepared, of course. And the brahmacharini comes in, beautiful plates, samosas, all the wonderful things we would, sweet rice, halavas there, little plate. Prabhupada take prasadam. So everybody else, there's like 20 devotees in the room, but George, and he's making sure he's eating while everything's going on. Prabhupada's talking. And then George is sitting eating. First he refused. He said, "I just ate." Prabhupada said, "No, take prasadam." Which was also very, no one left Prabhupada's room without getting prasadam. it's one thing I actually neglect talking about so often, is the importance of having that jar of para. That's what it would be often, was para, because it lasts forever, it's solid, not soggy. But everyone you leave, you get prasadam. So George came, he was taking his prasadam. He's finishing, of course, Prabhupada's, take more prasadam. Prabhupada, I'm full. Prabhupada, please, Prabhupada. Take more prasadam. He said, prasadam can never hurt you. So he makes him eat more prasadam. And he finishes, and how are you doing? George says, Prabhupada, he said, everything is okay. He said, I'm chanting. He said, I've been chanting 16 rounds. He said, but it's actually very difficult for me. He says, because when I chant 16 rounds, he said, when I'm chanting so much, he said, I really lose my desire to do my business, to do the business part of things. And Prabhupada looks at him. He says, we continue. He says, you have to continue with your work. He says, whatever you can chant. He says, you chant as much as you can. He said, it's okay. I'm saying that's not our instruction, as initiated disciples. And who knows, maybe one of the reasons he never initiated him. He knew his spot, in the society, how he was helping, which was, so much for so many. So he gave him that. But George's attitude was very submissive to Prabhupada, very sweet. This is 1975, and this was my final trip with Srila Prabhupada. Now I'm back in Hawaii, and that's where I stayed in 1975. Such a beautiful temple that Ambarish Prabhu got for Prabhupada to do his translating work. And of course the temple's still there, Panchatattva installed. So we're having our 50th anniversary, actually. It's 1969 was the first time Prabhupada went to Hawaii, when Gursundar and his wife Govinda Dasi were there. So they established the center in Hawaii. So Prabhupada went there in January 1969. So a few months we're having the 50th anniversary, inviting everyone to come to the temple that was involved over the years. Gursundar was the first. Of course, a year or two later, he sold the temple. And one devotee had given a down payment for that temple. He gave him the money back for that. And the rest of the money, he went to the Big Island. And he bought property for his commune. He went away. He took the money and left. So now it's 1975. And Prabhupada's there. He went to the Big Island with Guru Kripa to search out Gursundar. He wanted to see him. Guru Kripa took Prabhupada by himself. We also had a farm on the Big Island. So Prabhupada, in guise, he was going to go see the farm. So he gets to the Big Island with Guru Kripa. Guru Kripa didn't let me go. He wanted Prabhupada for himself that day. He said, I ain't buying you a ticket, So he left me. It was the only time I was ever left behind. It was just for the day. And he went over there. Prabhupada never even went to the farm that he went there to see. He said, where's Gursundar? They couldn't get a hold of Gursundar. They came back. So maybe a day or two goes by. Gursundar, they contacted him. Okay, he's coming to see Prabhupada. So when he came, I'm massaging Prabhupada in his room in Hawaii. So it's like 11 in the morning. And I had met Gursundar once in 72. I didn't know him at all. And he comes up by himself while I'm behind Prabhupada massaging him. And it was very strange. He had very long hair, a beard, and he seemed very, very, very distant. Gursundar had very deep-set eyes, and looked very, very intense-looking person, But he just sat down, and Prabhupada kind of says, how are you? And there was nothing coming out of him, And I'm massaging Prabhupada, and then he looks at him, and he's tears in his eyes. He said, what did I do that made you leave? And Gursundar's not answering. He said, I must have done something. He said, that caused you to leave. He kept saying, he didn't say, you left the temple, you left the deities, you left Tulsi Devi, you took money. He looked at him. He said, what did I do? Why did you leave? He said, why did you leave our society? What have I done? And he never said anything. And Prabhupada tried. And literally, tears in his eyes. Guru Kripa's told me he also heard everything. He was on the other side of the door listening. We were like, we just couldn't imagine what was Prabhupada doing. But because, of course, it's never how any of us see things. Well, whatever Prabhupada saw, he knew, I want to save him. He opened up this place. I'm here in Hawaii because of you. You know, Prabhupada didn't, he saw that we were doing things. And when you did something for Prabhupada, that was it. He was indebted. He was indebted to him. And he kept saying, what can I do? He said, how can I help? How can I have you come back? He never answered. So then finally Prabhupada said, okay, he said, you can go when you want. He gets up and leaves. He walks out the door, still behind Prabhupada. He said, he is a big rascal. He said, but I love him. That's Prabhupada. He went up to this person, kept saying, I've done something, I've done something. He just wanted to save him, just like he wants to save all of us. And he'll do whatever it takes. This is what we need to do all the time. We talk about saving our God brothers, our God sisters, our disconnected. But our approach should be like that. Not, you've been outside, you're fallen, I want to help you. They don't need your help. They need your love. And they're not fallen. They're devotees. We're all Prabhupada's disciples. We're all fallen. That's what Prabhupada saw. So anyway, that was his method. 1977, Gaurasundar came. It's so amazing. Madhavisa, September 1977, 2 months before Prabhupada left, me and Madhavisa are on the same plane from Hawaii, unbeknownst. We arrived there to see Prabhupada. The next day, Gaurasundar's coming with his partner, his wife at the time, Chandi. That's when she received initiation. September 1977, Prabhupada initiated Gaurasundar's wife as his disciple at that time. Prabhupada he never had any hard feelings with disciples who had gone away. He was always soft. Ultimately, it was nothing but softness in Prabhupada's heart, from the beginning. And to me, that was one of the most amazing things. And his conclusion, he knew. He said he's a rascal. Who isn't? I know I'm a big rascal. But every day I see Prabhupada's love, every day. That's what keeps me going. Not people whispering behind, you're like this, you did this, you're not doing this, whatever it is. No whispers from Prabhupada. Shouting, what can I do to bring you back? So on a flight from Mexico City to Caracas, one devotee lady, local lady, she had made Prabhupada muri for the flight, puffed rice and peanuts, chanced, turmeric, asafoetida, normal things. And it was one of Prabhupada's favorite meals from childhood. So Prabhupada, prasadam was very important to Prabhupada. And on the plane, there was always prasadam on the plane. 1 hour flight, 20-hour flight, prasadam's there. And as soon as the fasten seatbelt sign goes off, I put down Prabhupada's table. Table. He's at the window. I'm in the middle, and Paramahamsa's next to me on this Venezuela Airlines. So I put the table down. I open up this piece of aluminum foil filled with the puffed rice preparation. And Prabhupada starts taking prasadam. After a few minutes, he goes, okay. So I put down my table, I transfer it. I split the amount in half for me, half for Paramahamsa, ripped the aluminum foil. So now we're eating. And Prabhupada's just sitting quietly, and we're eating. To be with Prabhupada's so unique, you just carried on. Young stewardess comes down, stops right in front of Paramahamsa. She reaches beyond Paramahamsa, grabs puffed rice out of my plate, and eats it. And Paramahamsa's eating, Prabhupada's sitting, no one's paying attention but me, in total shock that this woman just invaded my plate. And she looks at me, all happy, smiley, pretty lady. It's very good. She says, what is it? I'm still in shock that someone put their hand in my plate on a commercial airline. And I'm thinking, wow, super soul. You know, who does that? And I say, it's puffed rice, we're vegetarian. So immediately she says, I can go to first class. Prabhupada never traveled first class, one flight. He said, this is waste of money. He said, we can't even eat all these things. He said, what's the point? So she says, I can go up to first class, get a fruit. And Prabhupada, yes. She says, would you like anything else? I look at Prabhupada, because I was his translator for public people. Anything else? Hot milk, always hot milk. I said, we'll all have hot milk and fruit. She says, okay, if I see anything else you can get, she said, I'll bring it. So she goes back. I look at Prabhupada. I said, Prabhupada, that is amazing. Thinking how she took his Maha Prasadam. They'd fight over it, you know, my godbrothers and sisters. When I had that, you know, and she just had it. And he says to me, women have natural tendency to serve. So he answered her going up front, but he didn't respond to the fact that I was saying a miracle just happened. He just, you know, and no miracles, probably, nothing. So she took care of us. So I found that, you know, an amazing event on its own. So I tell that story. So it's like in the 90s, I'm at a Prabhupada festival, one of the first Prabhupada festivals in New Dwarka. I guess it was around, I don't know, somewhere in the 90s or 2000 or so. And I talked for a few hours. And when I was done, one godbrother comes up to me. He said, you know, can I tell you a story? And I go, okay. He said, I've done a lot of traveling Sankirtan. He said, down in Mexico and South America. And he said it was always very similar. He said, you know, they're villages, not big cities. We would go to the towns and villages. He said, we're small. They always had a city center, maybe a fountain or something. So we would do Harinam there. And then after doing Harinam for some time and getting everyone talking, then we would go out in our Jeeps and we go into the countryside and just go one house. He said, you'd have to drive house to house. He said, so I was deep in the Brazilian forest. He said, in some village somewhere, he said, I stopped at a door and I knock on the door. A woman opens the door and says, Hare Krishna, because he's dressed in dhoti and kurta, so she recognized him. She said, Hare Krishna. So Hare Krishna. She said, come on in, you know. And he's in, and he's in a typical devotee house. You know, he sees a picture here of Prabhupada, and he's just totally, he's in the middle of nowhere saying, how did you hear? And she said, well, my first thing, she said, I was a stewardess on Venezuelan Airlines, and she said, I met Prabhupada on the plane. She said, and I, somehow or other, I just grabbed his Mahaprasadam. She said, that was the beginning. So 20 years later, in the middle of nowhere, like they say, a needle in a haystack, Prabhupada joined these two people together. I see more and more, the purport to me is, Prabhupada wants us to see how this process works. He wants us to see that the process works. Not that we're all just doing this for 50 years and we're hoping for some result at the end. You know, hoping, well, maybe Prabhupada will come, maybe. No, there's no maybes. He shows us over and over again the power, the potency he has. I got to see it. I got to see it with the Mekkala's death. I got to see Prabhupada. I hear so many stories. This is our business, to believe, to have that faith. Prabhupada does miracles. He did a miracle that day. Bam, just like that. If she would have walked by, none of that would have happened. But something told her, stop, grab Srutakirti's puffed rice. I don't know. But I know, you know, we have to learn this process works. The result is there. Spend your life. Don't think it has to happen somewhere along, you know. You'll get the moments. We get the little boosts every now and then. You know, it's like when you're going up the stairs, somebody pushes you. It's a lot easier, I find nowadays. Sometimes my wife will push me. I'm like, keep it up. You know? No, he's always giving us that push. Recognize it. Identify it. Accept it. Be grateful. But one of the things I enjoyed was watching Prabhupada reading his books. The first time I saw it happen as a servant going in his room, afternoon was reading time for Prabhupada. Sometimes he would do bhajans, play his harmonium and chant, and play kartals. Afternoon was always his personal time, very much so. And he used that time like he wanted all of us to do. Chanting, bhajan, reading his books. But to see him reading his books, I found very, very wonderful. The very thing he was telling us to do. He was doing it all himself. And one day he rings the bell, it's afternoon. I go in, I offer obeisances, sit up, and he's got his glasses on, and he's reading Bhagavad Gita. And he just looks at me. He didn't ask for anything. He wants to tell me something. And he's looking at me. He said, "This book is so nice." He says, "If you just read this book," he said, "you can become Krishna conscious. You don't have to read hundreds of books. So just this one book, and you'll become Krishna conscious." He kept saying it. Don't have to read so many books. He knew. He knew me very well. I wasn't reading very many books. And he kept emphasizing, just this book, he said, if you read it, he said, you can be Krishna conscious. It's such a nice book. And then he put his head down. That's the same as saying, you can go now. I'm done with you. He had nothing else to say to me. He just wanted to tell me, I'm enjoying this book. That's what he was saying. This book is, he's in ecstasy reading it. There's no pad and paper. He's not trying to see, is there anything wrong here? It's the Bhagavad Gita. I guess he could have had pages and pages. No, he was relishing it, telling me to relish it. And I said, he's reading, and I left. Everything goes on every day. Every day's with Prabhupada very similar. His schedule very, very similar. And 6 months go by. It's the afternoon. He's ringing his bell. I don't know what to expect. I go in. It's one of those days. He's reading Nectar of Devotion. I offer obeisances. I sit up. He's looking at me. He's got his glasses on. He doesn't ask for anything. This book is so nice. So much nectar is in this book. If you just read this book, you'll become Krishna conscious. You don't have to read so many books, not hundreds of books. Just this book. Everything is in this book. This is what he said. This is what's going on. I'm certainly not the one inducing this. And he knows, I guess, I'm sitting in my room. I already told him that. So he's saying, just read this book. Everything is there. Then he puts his head down and he's reading again. I offer obeisances. I leave the room. And I'm not picking up that nectar of devotion. I'm with him 2.5 years almost. So I don't know how many months go by. Another day comes up. I hear the bell ringing. I offer obeisances. I sit up. He's got his glasses on. He has Krishna book in front of him. Krishna book. I was initiated 1971 in July. I met Prabhupada then. I just saw him a couple times on the Vyasasan, nothing else. Now it's May of 1972. I was in New Dwarka for a week getting my second initiation, and somehow I got the mercy of reading Krishna book to Prabhupada every day in his garden, which I relished immensely because I saw how much he relished it. When he relished, we got the overflow. So now he's reading that Krishna book. I go in the room, offer obeisances, I sit up. Saying, this book, this wonderful book, he said. Everything, he said. He said, if you read just this one book, you can be Krishna conscious. And I'm just sitting. I've heard this a few times. I remember hearing it. I'm sitting and he's looking at me. He said, everything is here. He said, just read this one book. It's so nice. Prabhupada's loving it. But he didn't look down. He just kept staring at me. You don't even have to read the whole book. He said, just one chapter in this book, Krishna book, and many chapters, every story. He said, just read one of these stories. He said, if you just read one of these stories, you can be Krishna conscious. And he's looking, you know. He said, you don't even have to read the whole story. He goes, just one page. He runs his finger down the page. He said, just read one page from this book and you can be Krishna conscious. I'm like, man, you know, and I can't move because he's staring at me, but I'm a little uncomfortable. He says, you don't even have to read the whole page. He said, just one line. Prabhupada was very demonstrative. So everything he's saying, he's doing. He said, and he runs his finger across one line in the Krishna book. He said, just read one line from this book. He said, and you can be Krishna conscious. And he's still looking at me. And then he goes, just one word. Just read one word from this book, he said, and you can become Krishna conscious, because Krishna is in every word. And then he put his head down and continued reading. I offered obeisances and walked out of the room, and just completely mystified by Prabhupada. Just a few years ago, I believe maybe in 11th canto or 12th canto, there's a verse very much like what Prabhupada kept saying to me. And I realized, whenever Prabhupada said something, he had a source. He didn't make things up, you know, to induce something out of me. It was Shastra. It came from Shastra. Everything he was showing us, there was a base, there was a foundation in Shastra. That's what I realized with that. And what I realized is the potency of Srila Prabhupada's books. And he's so much, whatever he was telling us to do, don't think he was just telling us. He was telling us what he was doing. You know, he was telling, read my books, chant your, you know, that's the Acharya. You know, he tells you what he's doing. Like he said, everything I'm doing, he said, I've been doing since childhood. There was one thing, he said, I'm doing that I wasn't doing as a child. Translating these books. That was the only item. He said, everything else I've been doing. He said, Rath-yatra festivals, all these things were going on. A little boy. That was the one item. Those books. And those books, imagine, this is the importance of distributing them. They're Krishna. It's Krishna. Jai Anilo Premadana Karuna Prachu